you sit here, Claudine, you're going to die. Your business will die. Now it's time to change. I was always the youngest person in the room, and I'm leading people who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s, and they're not necessarily taking kindly to this 20-year-old coming to tell them, like, who does she think she is, like giving me all these instructions and giving me all these orders. I think the way how we do business has changed. My husband and I have complementary skills. So he is the creative, big picture, visionary. I'm the one who's going to sit down and dot the I's, cross the T's. As a believer, as a Christian, that model of social entrepreneurship allows me to both serve and impact my communities, pray like it all depends on God, and work like it all depends on you.
Oh, I love
that.
And
we have to be able to
put
the two
someone
together.
told me that when I was 16.
We've asked God to bless us. We've asked God for wisdom. We've asked God for sagacity. We've asked God to, increase our capacity for more. And now you go and sit and fold your arms. Well, faith without works is dead.
Hi, I'm Brenda Emmanus, and welcome to the Faith and Finance podcast brought to you by the Pentecostal Community Bank. Here we bring you insightful conversations exploring how faith and purpose marry with life and money management. On this podcast, we speak to leaders and founders and change makers who are navigating life's complexities while staying grounded in values, wisdom, and their long-term purpose. I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Claudine Reid. Claudine is the ultimate multitasker. She's an entrepreneur, strategist, and author of Balancing Act: Priorities of a Social Entrepreneur. Claudine's work combines strategy, social impact, and sustainability, and her career reflects what it really looks like to build with intention, not just financially, but personally and spiritually. This conversation is about planning and pivots, ambition and alignment, and how we balance life's many demands while still building something meaningful. Claudine, it's an absolute delight to have you with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for inviting me, Brenda.
Well, let's start with looking back at your own career. Mm-hmm. Were there early experiences that kind of made you realise, like, this is what I want to do with my life?
Absolutely, I think, but it didn't start like that. I think at the beginning of my career, and when we talk about my career, we're talking about 30 years, and sometimes I think back to myself, oh my gosh, it's like 3 decades.
And you still look 20.
Good genes and Jesus, that's what I like to say.
I love that.
When I think back, I don't think it started out intentionally. It started out as, hey, I've just finished my business degree, I've just got married, let me go, my husband had already started a business, let me just join there. It kind of came out of a sense of duty. And then probably in the first 2 to 3 years, I had a bit of an identity crisis, like, oh my God, I'm only here because of you being my husband, like, yeah. I'm only in the business because of him. And then I had this grand idea, I wanted to leave, I wanted to go and work in education, which I pursued. Mm-hmm. But the real pivotal point came when I wanted to step into a different space within that education sector. And I remember having a conversation with the head teacher at the time because I wanted to go and continue my professional development. And he said to me, no.
Why?
I'm like, whoa, you mean I wanted to reduce my days. And, we're talking a couple of decades ago. So all this stuff about flexible working and it just wasn't a priority at the time. And in that moment when he said no, I think something inside me said, you're not supposed to be here. You need to go back to your business. I'm like, oh, okay. So that was it. So in that moment is when I realized I needed to be a bit more intentional, a bit more strategic, because the things that I needed to do, I wouldn't have been able to do in the environment that I was in. And in that moment, it was almost like the scales fell off my eyes. Like, right, Claudine, now this is what purpose looks like. Go back to your business. And I know this to be true because on the first day back into my business, my team were like, oh my gosh, what's happened to you? Like, you've changed. The person who left 12 months ago is not the person who we're speaking to. And I know that to be true because in that 12-month period, I think I grew up. I was put into situations and environments that I hadn't seen in my own business. I think it was almost like a learning.
So it was insightful, that
very
experience.
Much so.
And how would you describe the person that went back in your own words? For them, you said you grew up. In what ways?
In terms of confidence, courage, clarity, more strategic. The decisions that I began to make were more intentional as opposed to, oh, let's try it. Oh, just not a whim anymore. I'm thinking a bit more strategic, because in that education system, everything is documented, everything is planned in advance. And so I'm taking those transferable skills back into my business and able to apply them in a way that helped the business to flourish.
Let me throw a scripture at you. Proverbs 16, verse 9 tells us, in their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. So how has that truth shown up in your own professional journey, would you say?
I mean, every step of the way, I'm always asking the Lord for wisdom, for direction. And I think what's really helpful for entrepreneurs or business owners to understand is that there might be things that we want right now, but it's not the right time, or we haven't got the capacity or the skill to develop or even manage the thing that we are praying or asking God for. So I think what's really important for us to understand is that, or to remember rather, is that the Bible says the steps of a good man are ordered by God. So we might be praying for something, or praying for wisdom, or praying for skill, or praying for team members. I still believe that God will order our steps in his time.
This is a very selfish question, because this is where I think I'm still a bit like a child. How do you know to listen? How do you know you've got the answer, that God is talking to you? Is it a heart thing or a head thing?
I wonder if it's a bit of both, and I wonder if it's different for different people. For me, I have just this overwhelming sense of peace. Hell might be breaking loose all around me, right? And we're talking about entrepreneurship, we're talking about business, we're talking about what that looks like. And I don't want to sugarcoat the conversation and make it think like, oh, we've prayed and everything is going to be okay.
Nirvana.
And all the ducks are going to be lined up in a row, and, the Holy Spirit is going to come into the conversation. Yes, whilst that happens, but there is sometimes still tension. But even in the tension, I can still hear God speaking to me. Even in the challenging circumstances, I've had major issues with contractors, with staff, with my own personal identity in terms of how I'm managing as a leader. But in those tense moments is where, let me just take 5 minutes and just, Holy Spirit, what are you saying to me in this season? Because right now I can hear noise, and I need to make sure that what I'm hearing is from, if I can tell you a really just short story.
Of course.
I remember we were having our very first inspection, HMRC, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs inspection. And I had recorded some information incorrectly. And I never forget, the inspector said to me, okay, can you explain what this is, please? And I could hear the noise saying, just make up a story. Just make up a story. And I took, literally, it felt like 5 minutes, but in reality, it's probably 5 seconds to still the noise in my head and answer the question truthfully. And I'll never forget, like, my knees were like banging like crazy. And the inspector said to me, okay, thank you for telling the truth. Because if you hadn't told the truth, it would have been an instant fine. Wow. And the reason why this is important is because sometimes you can hear noise, and you can hear things that are not necessarily the right thing to do. And you have to be able to dig deep to find that peaceful answer, which is the truthful answer. Might get you in a bit of trouble, but stick to the truth, because that's easier to navigate. You've got evidence, you can back up everything that you've got, rather than trying to make up stories. And so in that moment, for me, I hear God speaking, and it comes with a sense of peace.
Well, that leads me nicely to my next question, because I was going to ask you what have been the hardest lessons that you've learned in terms of leadership and business, particularly in the early years.
Particularly in the early years, I think the leadership challenges were about myself, me finding my own identity and finding where I fit in the grand scheme of things. And one of the reasons why that was challenging for me is because I was always the youngest person in the room. So I'm the youngest person in the room, and I'm leading people who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And they're not necessarily taking kindly to this 20-year-old coming to tell them, like, who does she think she is, like, giving me all these instructions and giving me all these orders. And I just had to learn how to manage people. And in managing people, I also have to increase my levels of personal self-awareness. When I become more aware of who I am and what I carry, it becomes easier for me to lead those people in my space, because we're all rowing together. we're all going in the same direction, but the way how I tell that story and help you along that journey, I'm not the type of leader who has to stand on the mountaintops and shout, everybody listen to me. I want it to be collective. I want it to be collaborative. And I want us all to enjoy the journey. And maybe that's the optimist in me, wanting everybody to enjoy the journey, because they're not necessarily all going to. But it's been a learning curve of learning to manage myself and managing people.
And at that stage, intuitively, it's come to me that perhaps we should clarify what your work is for those who don't know. Because we have.
Yes.
I'm speaking to you because I know I've mentioned you multitask, and there's a lot of things that you do.
So my work has evolved over time. So I've spent the first 3 decades of my career coordinating or managing services for vulnerable adults and children. So we were working with local authorities. We had over 10,000, in that period of time, we've employed or created over 10,000 job opportunities for in the health and social care and education space. This is myself and my team. My business partner is also my husband, but both of us could never have managed that level of impact just on our own.
It's huge.
So we've had, over that period of time, 10,000 staff and really excellent people who've joined that team to help us deliver that level of impact. Now, at this stage of my career, I focus on strategy and consultancy. So I'm working with major banks, I'm working with major organizations to help them strategize and develop solutions that impact the community.
So we're talking about strategy. How do you manage then personally approaching long-term planning and then being open to change at the same time?
Yeah, I think in a post-COVID, post-Brexit world, I think that season of life really taught us to pivot. It taught us that you have to have an element of flexibility and adaptability in your strategy, in your processes, and in your systems. Otherwise, you'll become so focused on this works here at this time, when actually the season has changed, technology has changed, the political landscape has changed, the economical landscape has changed, the social values of people have changed. And so having a very clear vision, a very clear strategic plan, but baking in room for flexibility to maneuver as COVID forced us to, baking in flexibility to adapt as changes in the economical climate has forced us to.
It's interesting because I always think in my own personal career that I've just sort of gone with the flow and taken the opportunities as they've come and then really made the most of them. But on reflection now, I'm listening to you talking, if I was to take that road again, I think I would have been more strategic in my planning and my next move and what I do next. Because I think, although I did well, I could have probably perhaps done better. Personally, mentally, financially, if I had planned. So do you think if that's one piece of advice you would give to others, do you think is to take planning seriously?
Yeah, there's an old advert or a saying that used to say proper planning prevents poor performance. And I never knew what it really meant until I came up against a hard challenge. But in that hard challenge, I realised I had thought ahead of time, but what I hadn't done is document my process. I hadn't documented the thing that was in my mind. And when that happened, Brenda, then I began to realise, this is what they're talking about. Let me start writing these things down.
Financial wisdom isn't gained by accident. Financial security is not reserved for the privileged few. Getting your money right requires intentionality, practical resources, and education. That's why the Pentecostal Community Bank offers a wide variety of financial literacy workshops, courses and support to help you get your finances back on track. Find out more by visiting pcbank.co.uk.
I think that planning process has allowed me then to leverage those opportunities because I've tried to think a couple of years in advance. It's almost like when my children were younger, I would always buy them bigger clothes because I didn't know what my financial position was going to be like in a couple of years' time.
And they grow into them.
So they'll always have something because we're growing into it. I've tried to adopt the same principle in my personal life and in my professional life, in my business. Let's plan a couple of years in advance. Let's make sure we've got some money put aside. Let's look for the best people that you could have on your team. And whilst we might not be able to pay them now, we might be able to reframe or restructure something, a benefit package that they might be able to grow into or support with. And so it's just helped me. And I guess the other reason why this is important is because my husband and I have complementary skills. So he is the creative, big picture, visionary. I'm the one who's going to sit down and dot the I's, cross the T's. Let me look a bit more into that and let me plan a bit more further in advance to make sure that we're compliant and we follow the regulatory changes. And so that the big picture vision ideas that we have to fit into a context. That's my role, and it's just been complementary.
That really marries well, doesn't it? Because I think subconsciously I was always torn between whether over planning meant lack of faith.
Yeah, you see, and this is the tension, I think, that many people will have. Like, we're going to leave it all to God. I heard somebody say, pray like it all depends on God and work like it all depends on you.
Oh, I love
that. And we have to be able to put the two together.
Someone told me that when I was 16.
We have to put the two, I think, together, because it's almost like saying, I'm going to leave this all to God and then I'm going to go and sit back and start doom scrolling on Instagram or something.
Oh,
like,
no, I'm not.
You've got to unfold your arms. We've asked God to bless us. We've asked God for wisdom. We've asked God for sagacity. We've asked God to, increase our capacity for more. And now you go and sit and fold your arms. Well, faith without works is dead. You at least have to put one foot in front of the other. You at least have to send that email, make that phone call, put yourself in the right environment, go to the networking event, put yourself in situations where you feel petrified.
Oh yeah, no, I do all that. I overworked it. I think perhaps I maybe turn to God or let God when things get difficult and I don't know quite what to do. But or when I'm not sure what to do, I say, well, God will sort it. God will sort it.
Yeah.
And thankfully, it often does.
I mean, I think that's a really true reflection, though, of life. So there are times in my career when I think about this, I've prayed, I think I've done everything that I could do, and I still feel like, oh my gosh, this is not working.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this person is getting on my last nerve. Oh my gosh, have I made the right decision? And for me, there's just that sense of peace that says either yes, you have, or now it's time to pivot. You've made the right decision for this time frame, and now it's time to change. And so this is for the stories that I remind myself.
Yeah.
The decision that you made here was for that period. Now you need to make a different decision to take you to that next step. So it wasn't that the decision was wrong. It's that it's now time to move. It's no longer fit for purpose. If you sit here, Claudine, you're going to die. Your business will die. Now it's time to change. And I think being flexible and adaptable in that space has been something that's really helped me.
What I've learned to do when things get difficult, or someone's hurt me or betrayed me, or things have been difficult, I've kind of said, right, thank you for the lesson. What is the lesson in this? Yes. What do you do in terms of your business? What approach do you take when business or people get challenging for you?
Exactly as you have said. I was experiencing a challenge in my business with a couple of my team members. And I remember asking God, what's the lesson here? What am I supposed to be learning out of this? And I'll never forget, I sat in a place of just stillness and just in this conversation with God. And I heard the voice unequivocally tell me that you need to build your muscle of resilience, because that test is coming to strengthen you. Because at that time, I hadn't had any major tests or major situations.
Nice.
Everyone's, no, it's Claudine, or high five, oh, this is really great, let's pray, everything's great, this is not great right now. But this was about resilience. And if you wanted to go into a new environment, if you want to do business at a different level, if you want to, I'm stepping into international opportunities, if you want to step into a bigger level of business, you need to toughen up, girl. I'm like, okay, Lord, you could have sent the message or the lesson a slightly different way.
You wouldn't have heard it.
Absolutely, I wouldn't. Absolutely. My back was up against the wall and I had to dig deep. And now when I sit back and look at those situations because this is still about self-awareness for me. This is still about me understanding my own personal capacity, but also understanding how do you deal with really difficult people, narcissistic people, people who have made up stories. Donald Trump team called it alternative realities with no evidence.
Yeah.
But you're in a situation and you have to back yourself. You have to be able to call your wisdom, your knowledge, your evidence to. I've never had to do that before.
Right.
So in that scenario, I'm asking God, like, I'm not a mean person. I've not been intentionally mean to people. Like, this isn't right. You need to get resilient. And so it's taught me, take off the rose-tinted glasses. Just because you've prayed doesn't mean everything's going to work in your favor. But what it does mean is that you're going to have peace about the situation, and you can still tap into a deeper level of peace that allows you to not lose your well-being, not lose your mental balance because other people are going crazy.
Yeah, let them.
Yeah, absolutely. Let them.
Let me throw another scripture at you. Luke 14:28 talks about counting the cost before building. What does counting the cost mean for you? Not just financially, but emotionally and relationally.
Yeah, this is right up my street, because this is me, right? I'm the person, before I move, I need to know every last detail, sometimes to my detriment. And that's, I think, the other reason why it's good to have partners and people on your team, because sometimes they'll move faster than I will, or they'll make a decision faster than I will. But I'm counting the cost. So at the beginnings, earlier stages in my career, my children were very young. I wanted to be a very present mum. I wanted to do the school runs, the pickups and all sorts. Parents' evening, all the plays, everything was really important to me. So I had to count that cost in terms of, what does that look like mentally, emotionally, spiritually? What does that look like in my role as a wife, as a mother, as an entrepreneur? I've got teams waiting for payroll. Like, you can't be so my diary is my best friend. Like, it's an extension. My diary is my third arm. And so I'm really quite clinical about the way how I manage my time and my diary. It's color coded. I remember showing it to Patrick. It's like, I don't need a color-coded diary. But that's what helps me to maintain my balance. And I guess people will find what works for them. But when you think about counting the cost, the reason my diary is color-coded is because the colors represent different areas or different projects that I'm working on. So at a quick glance, I can see, is there enough personal time in there? Is there enough spiritual time in there? Is there enough time on this particular project? So all the projects or businesses that I'm working on are color-coded. So at a quick glance, anyone can have a look at that. But more importantly, I can have a look at it and make sure that there is prayer, there is just white space, like space that I don't do anything.
Oh God, that's a luxury for me right now.
It's taken me a while to get there. So I'm saying this now after 3 decades of working and not getting this right. It's taken me 3 decades to learn that if you want to have balance, if you want to make sure that you can show up, not only for other people, because I think I don't have a problem showing up for other people. I have a problem showing up for myself.
Same here.
And so if you want to be able to show up for yourself, and I think also what's important at this age and stage of life, like, health becomes even more of a priority than it was when you're in your 30s. You kind of think you're invincible. I've got time. I can do this. I can run. I can manage on 2 hours sleep. Like, not anymore. Maybe when you were 30. Right now,
bleaching.
No way. And so counting the cost for me is really about looking at all of those pillars that help hold me up, and making sure each of those pillars have sufficient time, and time to pivot, time to refresh, time to reframe if we need to.
I'm sitting here so envious that you found that, because that white
After
space.
30 years.
Yeah, but I'm probably a little older than you. Because I'm just now beginning to realise just how valuable that is. But as you know, as a busy person, you feel guilty if you're sitting down doing nothing. You feel guilty if you haven't done enough work. You feel guilty if you haven't got time for the kids. You feel guilty if you know there's work still to be done and you're reading a story or whatever. I remember the big clash I had once when I had a scoop at work. We managed to get this exclusive with a big celebrity, and it was the night of my daughter's play, and that one is still rocking with me, and to have to make that decision is really, really tough. But busy people juggling so much feel guilty. So I guess learning to make space and time and breathe is, if you want to survive. I guess what I remember now all the time is what they tell you on the plane: put your mask on first and look after yourself first. But you mastered it far more than I have so far.
Well, there've been some major lessons along that way to kind of bring me to that space, and I think I don't know if as entrepreneurs, as leaders, as wives, mothers, whatever role, whatever hats you're wearing, I don't know if we fully take this into consideration in that moment. In that moment, we're just running at 100 miles an hour.
Of course, and responding to what's happening.
And responding to something until there's a major situation, a major incident, bereavement, health, grief, loss, mindset, whatever those issues are that you have to face. It's almost like that moment that stops you in your track. And then you start thinking about all the things that you haven't done or should have done that you haven't done that have made you arrive at this particular place. And so I'm saying that it's taken me 3 decades to get here. And I guess it's the conversation I have with my daughter now. Would I have done anything differently? I don't know.
Yeah, you don't.
I don't know. But I'm really pleased and grateful to God that I have the luxury of that choice now. I can sit back and think, right, over the last 30 years, this is what I've done. Now I'm choosing, this is my decade of distinction. I was 50 last year, and I call the next 10 years my decade of distinction, of being more intentional, more strategic with my time, picking projects and people and environments that I know where I will flourish. Whereas in that period of learning, I didn't know where I was going to flourish. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. It was a little bit like a child in a sweet shop. I want one of those, 2 of those, 3 of those. Let me have one of that. And now I'm at a stage where I can make an intelligent decision to determine what's good for me, my environment, and where I want to be.
That's part of maturity as well,
Absolutely.
isn't it? And experience. Now, you talk about how sometimes big things like a health scare or dramatic impact, something impactful in happening in your work, can force you to change. But you're also really conscious of the idea of conscious pivoting. Yes. So when do you know strategically is the right time to pivot, and when subconsciously do you know in your heart that it's the right time to stay? How do you work out what's the right or wrong in that aspect?
I think so from a number of perspectives. You're not living in isolation. So I've had to learn to stay true to my values, but also understand what's happening in the external environment. So looking at the political environment, looking at so my business was in a highly regulated sector, staying steps ahead of what those regulations or changing regulations and the impact that it would have on the business, so that we could always be 5, 6, 7 steps ahead of whatever those changes were going to be.
And they change a lot, quite quickly.
They change significantly. And so in order for that to happen, it would be very easy for us to stay here and say, oh, this is the way how we want to work because we've mastered this. It's taken us 5 years to get here. And on that 5th year, something has changed, which forces you to change. And so being aware of your external environment. I know I keep on talking about political changes, social changes,
but they impact
technological changes is a major, I remember our business was, we were doing well. I had an amazing, fantastic team of people. And then welcome artificial intelligence. Like, whoa, what am I going to do here?
I'm still working out whether it's friend or foe.
It can be both. But from an entrepreneur's perspective, I remember 3 of my team left roughly around the same time. They roughly cost me anything between £4,000 and £5,000 per month. Brenda, I replaced them with a £300 per month piece of software.
All right, okay.
Now you've got the choice of saying, no, this is working really well. The job descriptions are fine. Let's just keep it in this way. We can make this work because it's worked for 5 years. Are you stuck here when the entire industry is moving in a particular direction? Are you going to stay here because it works well? When actually this is saving speed, it's saving time, it's saving money, it's improved efficiency. And so when you talk about how do you know when to make that change, the external factors, the external environment will sometimes dictate to you what's right and what's not, as long as it's not compromising your values. And I'm very big on social value, social entrepreneurship. I think as a believer, as a Christian, that model of social entrepreneurship allows me to both serve and impact my communities, and allows us to generate revenue and use our revenue, our surplus or our profits, in a way that we see fit to do. I need to be able to still run a profitable business in order to serve my community. So I can't be so married to the methodology and forget the mission. I think it was John Maxwell who said, marry the vision and date the methodology. Okay. Because the methodology will change, but the vision will always stay the same. So you're always going to stay married or wedded to that initial vision, but the methodology, the way how you do it, is what will change, and that's worked for me.
See, one of the things I found hard as I've moved out my career, like away from television into leadership or working on boards, whatever, is making those really tough decisions. And that Isaiah 43:19 says, "See, I am doing a new thing." And in your position, as you was talking, I'm thinking, my God, if AI is going to really work for her and save us so much money, how do you kind of move into a new season and not abandon what you've had already? So how, for example, if you know AI is going to work for you, you need less staff, how do you manage losing staff or getting rid of staff? Because I would find that
it was a really hard decision, really hard. They made it easy for me in that they handed in their notice.
We're not always gifted in that kind of opportunity.
And now I'm in a consultancy space. So similar to yourself, I'm advising major organizations working in the international space, working with companies who are developing platforms and SaaS platforms that support entrepreneurs. I think the way how we do business has changed and is changing across the globe.
Do you think it's less people-centered because of AI and technology?
Less people, a different type of people-centered. I think the focus more is on higher value in terms of impact, in terms of social impact. That's the space that I'm operating in. So all of the businesses that I'm working with have a significant focus on social impact, social value, and what does that look like for them. And so in that space, I feel like I'm not starting from scratch. I'm starting from experience. I'm standing on that platform of 30 years, 3 decades of experience of looking at social value across the community, the city, the country, now to be able to take that up another level from a leadership and a consultancy perspective. And what that also allows me to do is bring real life case studies of things that have worked in that particular time frame. How can you repackage or reframe that to bring that into a different industry? And I really love that, because that cross-pollination was the transferable skills I spoke about in the education sector that I was able to take from that 1 year of leaving my business, bring everything that I had learned, bring that back into my business. Now I'm doing the same thing again, everything that I've learned in 3 decades and bringing that into a different space.
So if you used to put in one of those vacuum packs all the experience that you've had so far, what would you be advising people listening to this in terms of managing their life and their money?
I think it's important to remember Rome wasn't built in a day. And I think if you had asked me this question a couple of years ago, I have no idea. I do not know. But what I'm observing is that every season of life brings a different lesson. And enjoy the journey. I think it's really important. When I sit back and think about the time that has gone, 3 decades, it feels like yesterday. It doesn't feel long. It doesn't feel like this is a long stretch of time. And so I'd encourage people, just enjoy the journey. Don't miss those learning moments. The one thing that I've tried to be really intentional about is self-awareness, because I'm also recognizing that I too am evolving and changing into a completely different person. We are semi-empty nesters. And as a semi-empty nester, life is very different to when your children are home. I've got more free time, I've got more money, I've got just different priorities. And so enjoying that journey, I think, is really important, because now you can sit back and have that impact measurement or social impact conversation when you ask yourself the question, what has the last 30 years meant? Well, the last 30 years for me has meant I've created over 10,000 jobs. It's meant supporting vulnerable adults to stay in their own homes, which you can't put a price on that.
Of course.
Supporting young children to go back into education or employment. There is a social return on that investment, which is off the charts in terms of what would that cost the state? What would that cost the country if those services hadn't been in place? But all of that has taught me about myself. It's taught me about people. It's taught me about leadership. It's taught me about business. It's taught me about people. To live by that principle, I think there's a book it's called The Richest Man in Babylon. And he talks about the 70-10-10-10 principle. Maybe that is one of the really outstanding pillars that has stayed with me, that has even become a generational conversation. I have a conversation with my children, my nieces and my nephews. 70-10-10, this is what it means. You live on 70% of your income or less if you can. You tithe 1/10, you invest 1/10, you save 1/10, so that when you're talking then about money management and balance and what does this look like, the same way how you would do that for your personal life, implement those same principles for your business, because there is coming a day when you're going, oh my God, I've got no money. At least if you've got these pots, then something you can there. There's something there, and you're not, it's hard but not harder if it was zero.
Yeah, I find leadership fascinating, but I'm also mindful of what leadership means from an agenda perspective for women. I wonder how you see that, whether you think women lead differently, because a lot of the people I admire, the women leaders, have a feminine energy. I think some of the men right now are leading the world, and it's so wrong. But there's an empathy and certain values that I feel women have that makes a difference in leadership. Do you share that thought?
Most definitely. I think my definition of leadership will just be one word: influence, right? I think leadership is about influence. I think it's about the way how that influence is disseminated across your teams, across your families, wherever you are leading from. But I think leadership is not, leadership can't be siloed into one vacuum. There are many components in that piece. So you speak about feminine energy and masculine energy. From a corporation, from a company to a home, you need those different perspectives. You need those different types of values. You need even those different leadership perspectives for a more rounder, outlook. So I think women and men definitely lead differently, but I think there is space for collaborative leadership. I think there is space to hear everybody's voice around that table, and then the leader in charge, the person in charge, the ultimate decision maker, has to take those several complexities or those different perspectives into consideration before casting that final decision.
And as a social entrepreneur, do you think are there any mistakes that you've seen that are repeated consistently that you would like entrepreneurs, particularly in your space, to be mindful of?
Any mistakes that are made consistently? I think there is this thing about running too fast, right? Enjoying the journey. I think it was an interview that I heard with Michelle Obama talking about when her time in the White House, that the pace was just so fast that she had totally forgotten that she had been to different countries. I think she must have been speaking to her assistant and said, oh, I'd like to go to country X, and I said, oh, we've been there already. Like, when? What did we do? But I think the generations, we're running so fast that we're not enjoying the moments. We're not learning the lessons, because it's just what's next. And I understand life moves at a fast pace, and sometimes people are thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get left behind. And I guess, again, social media gives you this very false picture or this false narrative of 30 seconds of somebody's life that looks like perfection. I think slow down, enjoy the journey, and take note of the lessons so that you can rehearse them yourself. Every year, I call it Wisdom 2025, but it's wisdom and the year that we're in. And on my notepad, I have all the wisdom that I'm collecting, so that on that journey on the train or on the airplane, or you're just waiting, I can reflect back on all of those pieces of wisdom that I've collected for that year. And it forces me to slow down, because I'm remembering the moments. I'm remembering, what was happening in that moment. And it's given me a deeper sense of gratitude and a deeper sense of enjoyment just about life, because life is so fast. It's, things are happening, and some things we have no control over. And then you'll think, you'll get to the end of the year and you'll think to yourself, this has been a really poor year, or I haven't enjoyed this year. When actually, if you could go back to your wisdom notes,
you'll see all the great things that have actually happened.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to end our conversation without talking to you about your book, Balancing Acts, and why you wrote it, and what are the fundamental principles which you wanted to share with an audience.
Yeah. So thanks for asking about the book. I mean, I wrote it at a really challenging time of life, and I think this is why this conversation is really just really pivotal for me. So in 2019, I was diagnosed with a life-altering cancer diagnosis, and whilst I was in recovery, I started to think about my time whilst I was working, my role as a mum, my role as an entrepreneur, and all these different things, and I divided up life into what I like to call the 7 F's of fulfillment: fitness, faith, family, finance, fun, friends, and firm. Firm is the business. Those 7 things of what have led me to fulfillment. Now, whilst I was at home in recovery mode, I'm thinking about what's worked well, what hasn't worked well. When I get through this health situation, what am I going to do differently? How am I going to balance everything? And what I was realizing was the balancing act is just that. There are different things that you are balancing at different stages and different ages and stages of life. And for me, I arrived at that moment realizing, Claudine, you are actually okay. Like, you still have time. There is runway ahead of you. So all the things that you think didn't work so well here, you've got time to make some pivots and make some shifts so that you can continue to enjoy life. And so the key things, or the key pillars that I really want people to take away, is that they are in control of their own narrative. And if you've tried something and it doesn't work, it's okay. You can go again. You can make those shifts. And so I wrote the Balancing Act to help readers understand that life is a balance. And for me, as a social entrepreneur, these are the priorities that I was trying to balance. For somebody else in a different space, they may have different priorities that they want to balance, but that's how I was able to support myself and my mentoring community. I wrote a strategic planning book for people to actually read the book, but then put your own plan in place and put your own make your own strategic plan for your own life, so that you can have a bit more agency about what those outcomes need to look like.
And can I ask how you are now?
I have a clean bill of health, thank God.
Thank God for that. I'm really pleased to hear that.
Thank you.
So before we close, if there was someone who feels overwhelmed trying to get faith, finances, impact, and family right, what would be your lesson to them?
I would advise them to get some quiet space, get some quiet time, get a notepad and a pen, put the devices away, like let's go back old school, and write down the things that are important to them, the things that they are struggling with, and the things that have worked well. So what's worked well, what are you struggling with, and what do you want the next 5 years, for example, to look like? Once you've got those ideas out of your head and onto paper, get a mentor or somebody that can hold you accountable to the promises that you make to yourself. It's easy for me to keep a promise to you, Brenda, but it's harder and more difficult for me to keep a promise to myself.
I call them buddies. I get friends, or sometimes often someone who doesn't know you as well. Because friends can sometimes be too kind or not hard enough. Yes. I like someone who's going to be quite hard with me.
Yes. So that accountability person. And then the other thing, which is really important, is community. Find a community that can champion you. Find a community that can help lift you up.
So you've talked about lessons from 2025. What are you hoping that 2026 or the next year will be bringing you?
More international opportunities. So I am consulting for 2 companies in the US, and I'm looking at leaning more into that leadership role and consultancy role for organizations, and using all of the wisdom, all of the experience that I've built up over the last 3 decades to use that in a different way.
Well, I think you have so much to share, and I'm really glad you came here and have made time to share it with us. Claudine, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
What a brilliant, thoughtful and grounding conversation that has been with Claudine. Her reflections remind us that building well takes intention, humility, and wisdom. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Faith and Finance. If it resonated with you, please like and subscribe as we continue to explore what it means to build with purpose and integrity. Until the next one, God bless.